The first light of dawn stretched over the sprawling expanse of Naval Station Norfolk, casting a pale golden hue across the docks. The morning fog clung stubbornly to the steel-gray ships moored along the pier, swirling in wisps that danced across the water like restless spirits. The base was stirring to. Lifeguards at the gates were already alert. Recruits were jogging along the training grounds, and the smell of diesel and salt water filled the crisp air. Amid this waking chaos, a figure emerged from the shadows, walking calmly across the cobblestones. Emily Hart carried herself with an unassuming grace. Dressed in a simple navy blue jacket, khaki trousers, and plain sneakers, she looked like any other newcomer who might be arriving for orientation. Her hair, tied neatly in a low ponytail, was free of adornment, and her small duffel bag hung lightly from her shoulder. To anyone observing from a distance, she might have been just another transfer or a new administrative recruit, someone who would fade into the background of the bustling base. Yet every movement she made was deliberate, measured, and confident. Her eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the sprawling complex with an intensity that betrayed the depth of her experience. The recruits didn't notice her at first, too wrapped up in their morning routines. But soon, whispers began to ripple through the smaller groups clustered near the training grounds. "Who's that?" asked one young sailor, squinting toward the figure moving calmly past the barracks. "She's probably a transfer from some support division," another replied with a shrug. "Doesn't look like she can do much." The laughter that followed was soft but pointed. Recruits were creatures of habit, accustomed to teasing anyone who seemed out of place. And this new girl, quiet, composed, and solitary, was an irresistible target. A few of the bolder recruits began to exchange mischievous glances, whispering ideas about how they could challenge her, test her limits, and see just how much she could handle. Among them was Petty Officer Jason Miller, known for his bravado and penchant for asserting dominance over newcomers. At 24, he had already spent a few years on the base, and had built a reputation as someone not to be crossed, at least in the eyes of his fellow recruits. His eyes lingered on Emily as she walked past, noting her calm demeanor and the ease with which she carried herself. Something about her irked him. It wasn't fear, but a subtle irritation that she didn't behave like the others. "Hey, new girl," Jason called, his voice carrying across the training yard. "You lost or just wandering around?" Emily's eyes flicked toward him, registering the challenge without surprise. A faint smile touched her lips, polite but unreadable. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she continued her path, pausing briefly to observe a squad practicing drills, noting their posture, coordination, and the way they executed orders. Her silence was unnerving to Jason, who had expected either a defensive retort or an awkward stumble. Neither came. "She's weird," muttered another recruit under his breath. "She's not scared at all." Emily finally spoke, her voice calm and steady, carrying just enough authority to make the group pause. "I'm here to learn the base," she said simply, "and to see how things are run." It was a statement so neutral, so seemingly innocuous, that it disarmed them further. But it carried a subtle weight, the weight of someone who had seen much more than they had, someone who understood structure and discipline without needing to announce it. The morning continued, and Emily moved among the base with quiet purpose. She inspected the training grounds, glanced at the maintenance bays, and even paused near the mess hall to observe how personnel were interacting. She noticed a young sailor struggling with a heavy crate, clearly exhausted, but too proud to ask for help. Without calling attention to herself, she walked over and in one smooth motion, helped steady the crate while guiding him on proper lifting techniques. The sailor blinked in surprise, muttering thanks. Some of the recruits began to murmur, their curiosity growing. Who was this quiet, competent woman who didn't seek attention but commanded it effortlessly? As the day progressed, Emily's path crossed again with Jason Miller. He had decided that if she was going to walk around pretending to know things, she needed a test. Something physical, something public, to assert dominance. "Morning drill, new girl," he called, raising his voice over the sounds of marching and shouting from the recruits' exercises. "Think you can keep up?" Emily paused, measuring him with a single glance. There was no fear, no hesitation, just the calm assessment of a seasoned professional. "Lead the drill, or I'll follow," she said softly. Jason blinked, caught off guard. Most would have hesitated or protested. She accepted the challenge without confrontation, without the arrogance he expected. Her willingness to engage on his terms both frustrated and intrigued him. What he didn't realize, and what none of the recruits saw, was that Emily had not only accepted the challenge to engage with them, but had done so to observe, evaluate, and understand the culture of the base. She was taking mental notes of the hierarchy, the morale, the gaps in leadership, and even the subtle ways that discipline was enforced or ignored. Every laugh, every whisper, every competitive shove in the drill yard was a piece of the puzzle. By the time she finished her first day, she already had a clear picture of what needed to change and who might be capable of change. Officers passing by gave her polite nods, unaware that the new girl in casual attire was the very person who would soon hold authority over the entire base. Emily made a mental note of the senior officer's posture, noting who seemed disengaged, who overcompensated for insecurities, and who genuinely earned the respect of their subordinates. These observations would be invaluable later. By late afternoon, as the sun burned away the morning fog and the base settled into its routine, Emily paused on a dock overlooking the harbor. The smell of salt water was sharp. The cry of seagulls high above punctuated the rhythmic hum of ship engines. She exhaled slowly, letting the day's first impressions settle in her mind. There was work to be done, yes, but she could already sense the possibilities. The base was like a sleeping giant, full of potential, yet constrained by complacency and assumptions. And she intended to awaken it. The recruits continued to whisper about her. Jason Miller, in particular, was growing frustrated. There was something about her that defied the usual patterns of power and submission, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. He had faced many newcomers, many challenges, but none had left him so unsettled. Emily Hart, meanwhile, walked through the base with quiet assurance, fully aware of the ripples her presence was already creating. She was more than the new girl they thought she was. She was the leader they didn't yet realize they had the base Admiral in disguise, observing, learning, and preparing to reshape the command from the ground up. And when the time came, the recruits who laughed at her that morning would learn a lesson about respect, authority, and humility they would never forget. The first day ended, but the game had only begun. And Emily Hart had already won the first round without a single person realizing it. The morning after her quiet arrival, the base was alive with its usual rhythm, footsteps echoing against concrete, the low hum of machinery, and the rhythmic calls of drill instructors. Emily Hart had already taken in much of the base during her first day, and today she moved with the same calm purpose, walking through the sprawling compound with eyes that missed nothing. Every interaction, every subtle gesture, told her something about the state of the personnel she was soon to command. The recruits noticed her immediately, gathered near the training yard, as if drawn by an invisible magnet. Jason Miller, still simmering from yesterday's encounter, nudged the others. "She's back," he muttered, a mix of frustration and curiosity in his voice. "I still don't get her. Who does she think she is? Just wandering around like she owns the place." Emily's gaze swept over the group, calm and unshaken. She did not react to their whispers or sideways glances. To the casual observer, she seemed relaxed, even unassuming. But to anyone paying attention, there was a subtle intensity in her posture, a quiet confidence, like someone who knew exactly where they were and exactly what needed to be done. Jason, deciding that hesitation was weakness, stepped forward. "Morning, new girl," he called again, his tone heavier this time, laced with bravado. "Think you can handle the morning drills without falling flat on your face?" Emily paused and studied him briefly. Her dark eyes, sharp and steady, held his gaze. There was no trace of fear, no hint of doubt, only the quiet assessment of someone weighing the situation carefully before acting. Then, with a calm voice that carried authority without arrogance, she said, "I'll participate. Lead the drill, or I'll follow your lead." The words, simple as they were, disarmed him. Normally, newcomers would falter under pressure, stumble over instructions, or hesitate in confusion. Emily's acceptance of the challenge, without complaint or ego, was unlike anything Jason had ever encountered. A flicker of irritation crossed his face, but he masked it with a confident smirk. As the recruits moved to form lines on the drill field, Emily slipped easily among them. She observed quietly as they executed commands, her eyes noting every misstep, every hesitation, every subtle display of arrogance or carelessness. Her assessment was immediate, silent, and precise. She was already forming opinions about who among them could be trusted, who was overconfident, and who might have the potential to rise to greater responsibility. By now, a small crowd had formed, consisting of curious recruits and officers. Lieutenant Sarah Green, a young officer with a keen sense of observation, lingered at the edge of the drill yard. She had seen many new girls arrive over the years, most fading into obscurity within days. But Emily's presence was different. There was a calm strength about her, an aura of focus and purpose. Green felt a pang of curiosity and perhaps unease. Something about this woman suggested she wasn't merely a transient figure, but someone who commanded attention without demanding it. The drill began, and Jason barked orders with exaggerated confidence. "Move, faster! Keep up!" He glanced back periodically, expecting Emily to falter, expecting a slip that would prove his superiority. But Emily moved seamlessly, her posture perfect, her timing impeccable. She executed each maneuver with precision, never rushing, never hesitating. Her feet struck the ground with disciplined rhythm, her arms and body aligning with the commands in a way that made her seem almost like a mirror of the training manual itself. Even the instructors paused to take notice, exchanging subtle glances at one another. Jason's smirk faded as he struggled to keep pace, his breath coming in short, frustrated gasps. "What the?" he muttered, caught off guard. The recruits around him stumbled, their own confidence faltering in the presence of someone who clearly exceeded their expectations. Emily's calm smile, subtle yet unmistakable, seemed to highlight their shortcomings. By the time the drill ended, whispers had spread across the yard. "Who is she?" one recruit asked. "I've never seen anyone move like that," another whispered. Jason stood frozen for a moment, a flush of embarrassment creeping across his face. The realization that the woman he had intended to humiliate had outperformed everyone, without breaking a sweat, unsettled him deeply. Emily, meanwhile, did not gloat, did not demand recognition. She simply walked to the edge of the field, taking a moment to observe the reactions of those around her. Her assessment extended beyond physical performance. She was watching confidence, ego, discipline, and character. The recruits who had once laughed were now subdued, their curiosity mingled with uncertainty. After the drill, Emily moved toward the mess hall to gather her thoughts and prepare for the next set of observations. Along the way, she passed several junior officers and enlisted personnel. Some offered polite nods, others barely looked up. She returned their acknowledgement with a calm, brief nod, a gesture of respect that felt both deliberate and natural. In her presence, ordinary gestures carried weight, and her composed demeanor subtly reminded everyone that authority was not always loud or ostentatious. It could be quiet, patient, and observant. Lieutenant Green followed her discreetly, curiosity growing with every step. "There's something unusual about her," Green murmured to a colleague. "She doesn't speak much, yet you feel compelled to listen. She moves without drawing attention, but you notice everything." Emily overheard, though she didn't react. Observing people, understanding their motivations, and discerning the underlying dynamics of the base was part of her method. She allowed others to underestimate her, letting their assumptions reveal their true character. Later, in the administrative section, Emily quietly reviewed training logs, schedules, and operational reports. She noted where protocols had been ignored, where communication had broken down, and where morale was flagging. Every observation was cataloged in her mind, forming a clear picture of the base's strengths and weaknesses. She knew she had arrived at a pivotal moment. Change was needed, but it would require patience, strategy, and careful navigation of egos. Meanwhile, the recruits continued their low-level whispers. Jason Miller's frustration simmered beneath the surface. He didn't understand why he couldn't rattle her, why her composure remained unshaken in the face of his challenges. That irritation, he would later realize, was part of the lesson she was imparting without ever speaking directly. Strength and authority were not demonstrated through aggression or dominance, but through quiet confidence and measured action. By midday, Emily had traversed most of the base. She watched sailors maintaining the fleet, observed logistical teams coordinating shipments, and even paused to speak briefly with a maintenance crew repairing a ship's deck. Her approach was always respectful, always calm, yet subtly commanding. Each interaction left an impression, building a network of influence without overt displays of rank. It was during a short break near the harbor that Emily allowed herself a reflective moment. The sun had climbed higher, burning away the morning mist, casting long shadows from the ships onto the water. She looked out across the docks, watching the routines of the base unfold with practiced eyes. In every gesture, every conversation, every small interaction, she saw potential for growth, for cohesion, and for renewed discipline. She knew the recruits would test her again, as they always did with someone unfamiliar. And she was ready. But Emily also knew something the recruits did not. She had the experience, the rank, and the authority to reshape the culture of this place. They only saw the casual clothes, the small bag, and the quiet smile. They did not yet realize that the woman they assumed was just another new girl was, in fact, the Admiral of the base, the ultimate authority who could make decisions affecting everyone's career, assignments, and future. As the afternoon drills concluded, Jason Miller approached once more, unable to hide the mix of irritation and begrudging respect. "You did well today," he said, his tone cautious, almost wary. "Better than I expected." Emily turned to him, her eyes steady, her voice calm. "Thank you. Tomorrow we'll do better. All of us." There was no arrogance, only quiet assurance. Her words carried subtle power, hinting at leadership and guidance without demanding obedience. Jason didn't realize it yet, but a seed had been planted, a seed of respect, curiosity, and ultimately humility. By the end of the day, Emily Hart had moved through the base not as an outsider, but as someone already intimately familiar with its rhythms and flaws. She had quietly observed, assessed, and influenced without revealing the full measure of her authority. The recruits, officers, and personnel alike would remember her presence, not as a figure of intimidation, but as someone calm, competent, and quietly formidable. When Emily finally retired to her temporary quarters that evening, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The base had already begun to reveal itself to her, the dynamics of leadership and respect unfolding naturally. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The challenges, the tests, and the lessons were just beginning, and Emily Hart, The quiet, unassuming new girl was more than ready to face them. The first impression had been made, and the base would never be the same. The sun rose higher over Naval Station Norfolk, glinting off the steel hulls of moored ships, casting shimmering reflections onto the calm water. The base was alive with the usual morning chaos, sailors jogging along the docks, the low hum of engines, and drill instructors barking orders over the crisp air. Emily Hart moved with quiet purpose through the compound, observing, listening, noting every detail. Today, however, a sense of anticipation rippled through the recruits. They had decided, albeit without consulting protocol, that the new girl needed to be tested again. Petty Officer Jason Miller had spent the previous night stewing over Emily's flawless performance during yesterday's drill. The humiliation of being outpaced by someone he considered beneath him was not easily forgotten. His ego had been bruised, and he was determined to restore his dominance, or at least see her falter. He gathered a small group of recruits, whispering and smirking as he plotted their next move. "She's good, I'll give you that," he admitted reluctantly to one of his peers, "but I'm not letting this slide. She can't outdo me twice." Emily, unaware of their private schemes, continued her observations. Her demeanor remained calm and composed, a subtle air of patience guiding her actions. She had seen challenges like this before, small displays of arrogance from those unwilling to acknowledge skill and experience. But she didn't confront them immediately. Leadership, she knew, was not about winning a battle of words or ego. It was about letting people reveal themselves, then guiding them toward understanding. By mid-morning, the recruits had assembled near the drill field once more. Jason stepped forward with exaggerated confidence, clapping his hands. "All right, new girl," he announced, his voice carrying across the yard. "Today, you're going to run the obstacle course. Let's see if you can keep up." He gestured toward a series of hurdles, rope climbs, and water-filled trenches. Several of the recruits snickered, anticipating her inevitable struggle. Emily's gaze swept over the course, taking in each obstacle, the spacing, the rhythm required to navigate it efficiently. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. Instead, she assessed, mentally calculating the optimal path for speed, balance, and precision. The recruits waited impatiently, some rolling their eyes at her calm demeanor, others exchanging uncertain glances. "I accept," Emily said, her voice quiet but firm. "When do we start?" Jason blinked, momentarily stunned. Most newcomers would have protested or expressed concern. Emily, however, had no need for theatrics. She accepted the challenge, signaling her intention to participate fully without complaint or hesitation. The drill instructor overseeing the session raised an eyebrow but allowed the course to proceed. "Positions," he barked. "On my whistle, go." The recruits surged forward, some sprinting recklessly, others attempting to maintain balance but faltering under pressure. Jason led with energy, his confidence radiating outward. He glanced over his shoulder, expecting Emily to fall behind immediately. Instead, she moved with effortless grace, navigating hurdles with precise timing, scaling rope climbs with fluid strength, and crossing trenches with measured agility. The whispers began almost immediately. "She's fast. Look at her form." Jason's smirk faltered as he struggled to maintain the lead. His muscles burned, his breath came in ragged gasps, and yet Emily remained steady, never breaking pace, never showing fatigue. Each movement was deliberate, each step controlled, as though she had anticipated every challenge and prepared for it long before stepping onto the course. A few recruits attempted shortcuts or careless maneuvers, only to stumble or get entangled. Emily's eyes briefly swept over them, not in condescension, but with the calm evaluation of someone noting strengths, weaknesses, and potential for improvement. She finished the course cleanly, her posture upright, her breathing even, and her expression serene. When she reached the final obstacle, she paused only briefly to offer a subtle nod of acknowledgement to those who had made genuine effort, then stepped down with composure. The recruits, panting and disheveled, gawked in disbelief. Jason's jaw tightened. He had expected her to falter, to struggle, to give him the upper hand. None of it happened. Emily had not only matched him, she had surpassed him with ease. A ripple of astonishment spread through the assembled crowd. Recruits muttered among themselves, unsure whether to be impressed or intimidated. Even the drill instructor, a seasoned veteran accustomed to evaluating physical performance, gave a subtle nod of approval. "What? How?" one of the younger sailors whispered. She's incredible." Jason, his pride wounded and ego bruised, approached her, trying to mask his confusion. You're good," he said grudgingly. "Better than I expected." Emily's smile was calm, unassuming. "Thank you," she replied. "You all performed well too. Remember, it's not just speed or strength. Discipline, focus, and consistency matter just as much." Her words were measured, instructive, and almost effortless. Yet beneath the calm exterior lay authority, a quiet confidence that commanded attention without requiring dominance. The recruits felt it, even if they didn't understand it. Lieutenant Sarah Green, watching from a distance, felt a mix of curiosity and admiration. She had seen many officers perform drills, many new arrivals over the years, but Emily was different. She led without demanding attention, guided without asserting superiority, and inspired respect without ever raising her voice. Green's instincts told her that Emily was not just competent, she was extraordinary. Jason tried to regain some sense of control. "All right," he said, forcing a smirk. "Maybe you're not terrible. But I bet you're not even close to being ready for real leadership here." Emily tilted her head slightly, her expression calm. "Leadership isn't proven by a single obstacle, Jason," she said gently. "It's shown through consistency, through understanding people, and through knowing when to act and when to observe. Today, you've shown me some of your strengths and a few areas to work on." The words stung, though Jason didn't fully grasp why. There was no insult, no scolding, only truth delivered with quiet authority. And somehow, it was more unsettling than any outright challenge. For the remainder of the morning, Emily continued to move among the recruits and instructors, offering subtle guidance, adjusting small errors, and demonstrating techniques without making it a spectacle. Her presence altered the rhythm of the base, even if only slightly. The recruits who had once mocked her were subdued, their earlier arrogance replaced by respect tinged with uncertainty. By the end of the challenge, Jason and the others gathered near the edge of the field, exhausted, breathless, and silently acknowledging what they had already realized. Emily Hart was no ordinary newcomer. She moved with the confidence of someone who had seen, done, and understood more than they could imagine. She led by example, taught through action, and commanded respect without ever demanding it. And yet, they still didn't know the full truth. They didn't know that the quiet, capable woman before them, who had accepted challenges without fear, navigated the course flawlessly, and spoken with calm authority, was not a mere recruit or administrative officer. She was the base admiral, the highest-ranking officer on the entire station, silently evaluating everyone's character and skill. As the morning ended and the recruits dispersed, Jason lingered, unable to shake the mix of admiration, confusion, and frustration he felt. Emily, observing him from a distance, made a mental note of his competitiveness, his potential, and his need for guidance. Leadership, she knew, was not about breaking people, it was about shaping them, revealing their strengths, and teaching humility. By noon, Emily had walked the length of the training grounds twice, checked the maintenance areas, and observed routine operations. Every interaction, every glance, every whispered comment was catalogued, assessed, and stored for future reference. She understood the base's rhythm, the weaknesses in protocol, and the gaps in discipline, and she already knew how she would address them, slowly but surely. As she paused on the edge of the pier, looking out at the ships bobbing gently in the harbor, she allowed herself a brief reflection. The challenge had been more than a test of skill. It had been a test of ego, character, and perception. And she had passed it silently, effortlessly, without ever needing to assert her rank or authority. Emily Hart had walked onto the base as a newcomer, underestimated, and dismissed by the very people she would soon lead. She had navigated the challenge with precision and grace, teaching lessons without speaking them directly. And she knew this was only the beginning. The base, the recruits, and even the officers themselves were about to learn a very important truth. Leadership was not defined by title alone, but by the ability to act decisively, observe keenly, and command respect through quiet competence. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the training yard, the stage was set. Emily had accepted the challenge and proven her skill. The recruits, now humbled but intrigued, began to realize that the new girl they had underestimated was far more formidable than anyone could have imagined. And somewhere deep in her mind, Emily knew the next challenge would be even greater testing, not just physical skill, but loyalty, discipline, and the very character of those around her. The obstacle course had ended, but the real challenge, the challenge of leadership, respect, and authority, was only beginning. And Emily Hart, quiet, unassuming, and deceptively calm, was ready to lead them all. By late afternoon, the mood at Naval Station Norfolk had shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways. Word of the previous morning's obstacle course spread quickly through the base, like ripples in calm water. What had started as curiosity and mild amusement now swelled into a mixture of admiration, speculation, and unease. Recruits whispered in clusters, glancing surreptitiously toward the new girl, Emily Hart, who moved through the base as if the murmurs of the entire station were inconsequential to her. "She's unbelievable," muttered a young sailor to his friend, while they carried supplies toward the dock. "Did you see how she finished that course? Faster than Miller and the others combined." "Yeah? But did you notice her technique? She didn't even break a sweat. She just handled it like it was nothing," the friend replied, shaking his head in disbelief. Petty Officer Jason Miller, still simmering with a mix of envy and grudging respect, listened from a distance. His pride had taken a hit, and he was struggling to process what he had just witnessed. He had expected the new girl to falter, to struggle, to reveal a flaw. Instead, she had performed flawlessly, her composure and skill unmatched. His initial amusement had faded into frustration, and he was left with a nagging, uneasy feeling that he couldn't quite identify. Emily, however, remained largely unaware of the gossip trailing her. She moved through the base with her usual calm focus, observing interactions, noting inefficiencies, and assessing personnel. Every passing glance, every casual conversation, provided her with insight into the morale, discipline, and interpersonal dynamics of the base. She was particularly attentive to the subtleties of hierarchy, who deferred to whom, who commanded respect, and who relied on intimidation to assert authority. Lieutenant Sarah Green, who had been quietly observing Emily since her arrival, found herself drawn into the swirl of whispers and rumors. She had seen countless new arrivals over the years: junior officers, administrative clerks, even occasional civilian contractors, but none had left an impression like Emily Hart. There was something about her quiet confidence, her patient observation, and her effortless command of presence that made Green uneasy, yet fascinated. "Who is she?" Green asked quietly of a fellow lieutenant, her tone tinged with curiosity. "No one knows for sure," the other replied, shrugging. but I've never seen anyone handle the recruits like that. She doesn't yell, doesn't push, and yet everyone seems unsettled around her. Meanwhile, the recruits were actively testing her patience, albeit unknowingly. They offered subtle challenges, assigning menial tasks, observing her reactions, and even making small attempts at mischief, all designed to provoke a reaction or reveal weakness. Emily tolerated their antics with a calm equanimity, responding only when necessary with brief, instructive guidance. Every interaction became a subtle lesson, every challenge an opportunity to observe character. Jason, who had once considered himself the dominant force among his peers, found himself particularly unsettled. His attempts to undermine or outshine Emily had failed, leaving him uncertain how to proceed. He began to notice her patience, not just her skill, but the way she allowed people to test her without reacting emotionally. It was both infuriating and captivating, and he couldn't shake the growing sense that there was far more to this woman than met the eye. By mid-afternoon, Emily had moved through most sections of the base inspection yards, administrative offices, and training grounds. She noted the gaps in communication between officers and enlisted personnel, the uneven distribution of workload, and the subtle signs of disorganization that could, if left unchecked, impact efficiency. Her observations were meticulous, and her mind cataloged every detail for later analysis. Rumors continued to spread. Some whispered that she had been a decorated officer from another base, perhaps a veteran of special operations. Others speculated that she had come from an intelligence background, given her calm and deliberate demeanor. Each new theory was more fantastical than the last. But none of the recruits or even many officers suspected the truth, that Emily Hart was the newly appointed base admiral, observing in disguise to gauge the state of her command. Even the senior officers began to feel the subtle impact of her presence. They were accustomed to operating with authority and experience, yet Emily's quiet scrutiny left them uneasy. She didn't overtly challenge their decisions, but her keen observations and precise questions exposed lapses in judgment, overlooked protocols, and inefficiencies. Her manner demanded attention, respect, and reflection, all without a single overt assertion of rank. By late afternoon, Emily paused near the edge of the harbor to observe a group of recruits unloading supplies from a ship. A younger sailor struggled with a particularly heavy crate, and two others attempted to correct his technique without success. Emily approached quietly, demonstrating the proper way to lift and balance the load. Her instructions were concise and precise, emphasizing efficiency and safety. The sailors nodded in appreciation, some glancing at each other with newfound respect. Jason, watching from a distance, felt a twinge of frustration. He had expected her to command attention through ego or rank, yet she wielded influence through action, observation, and patience. Each demonstration of skill, each calm intervention, further undermined his sense of superiority. He began to realize that his earlier assumptions about her were flawed. Lieutenant Green, observing Emily from across the dock, noted the subtle dynamics in play. "She doesn't demand respect," Green whispered to herself. "She earns it effortlessly, just by being competent, calm, and observant. She's teaching the recruits, guiding the officers, and reshaping the culture without anyone realizing it yet." The recruits began to whisper among themselves, the tone shifting from mockery to awe. Emily's reputation as the mysterious new woman spread like wildfire. They speculated, argued, and compared notes, trying to understand how someone so unassuming could command such silent authority. "She's something else," one recruit said. "I don't even know how to explain it. She just knows everything, and yet she doesn't act like it." Emily continued her rounds, visiting the mess hall, checking administrative records, and observing drills from a distance. Each encounter revealed more about the base's culture and the individuals who inhabited it. She identified those who were motivated, those who were complacent, and those whose arrogance might hinder progress. Her observations were methodical, precise, and ultimately aimed at fostering improvement rather than punishment. As evening approached, the base settled into a quieter rhythm. The sunlight cast long shadows over the docks and training grounds, highlighting the steel structures and worn concrete paths. Emily paused for a moment, reflecting on the day's observations. The base had revealed itself to her, the strengths, weaknesses, and potential of its personnel. She had seen enough to begin formulating a plan to address the gaps in discipline, communication, and leadership. The whispers continued long after she left the immediate vicinity. Even officers who were initially skeptical found themselves considering her insights, noting her ability to see beyond the surface and assess character and capability with uncanny precision. Emily had become, almost invisibly, a catalyst for change. Her presence challenged assumptions, inspired reflection, and subtly shifted the culture without any overt declarations. Jason Miller, finally alone for a brief moment, leaned against a railing, staring out at the harbor. He was still frustrated, but the frustration was now laced with respect. He had underestimated her, and he knew it. Something about her presence lingered in his mind, a quiet power that demanded recognition, not through intimidation, but through competence and observation. By nightfall, Emily had returned to her quarters, taking a brief moment to review her notes and observations. She reflected on the day's events, the drills, the whispered rumors, the small challenges, and the subtle lessons she had imparted without force. She knew that the upcoming days would bring greater tests, not of physical ability, but of character, loyalty, and discipline. The base was awakening, and she would guide it carefully, ensuring that respect, competence, and leadership flourished. Emily Hart had arrived quietly, observed attentively, and already begun reshaping perceptions without a single person knowing her true identity. The whispers and rumors would continue, growing in intensity and curiosity, as the recruits and officers alike began to sense that this new girl was unlike anyone they had encountered. And when the time came for the truth to be revealed, the impact would be profound. For now, she allowed herself a small smile. The base was listening, learning, and evolving, even if no one realized it yet. The seeds of respect, curiosity, and change had been planted. And Emily Hart, calm, composed, and quietly commanding, would continue to cultivate them, one observation, one lesson, and one challenge at a time. The first days had passed. The whispers had begun. And the base, still unaware of the true authority standing among them, was on the cusp of transformation. The morning sun cast a sharp glare across the sprawling expanse of Naval Station Norfolk, illuminating the familiar hum of activity that filled the base. Sailors jogged along the docks, engines rumbled in the harbor, and drill instructors barked orders that echoed over concrete and steel. But today, there was an undercurrent of tension that the usual rhythms could not mask. Rumors about the new girl had already spread, curiosity mingling with skepticism. What no one expected, however, was the imminent test that would reveal the true measure of Emily Hart's authority. The announcement came abruptly, a surprise inspection by the Department of Defense. Word traveled quickly, sending waves of anxiety through the ranks. Officers scrambled to ensure paperwork was in order. Maintenance crews rushed to fix minor imperfections, and recruits fretted over every detail. The base, usually efficient in routine operations, suddenly found itself under pressure, a pressure that threatened to expose its weaknesses. Jason Miller, who had spent the past few days alternately mocking and studying Emily, glanced around nervously. He had assumed that her calm demeanor was a matter of personal composure, but the inspection changed everything. Now the stakes were higher. Every misstep would be scrutinized, every lapse noticed, and the recruits' nerves were fraying under the weight of potential consequences. Emily, meanwhile, observed the rush of activity with measured eyes. She did not panic, did not shout, and did not berate anyone. Instead, she moved quietly among the crews, assessing priorities, identifying the areas of greatest risk, and allocating attention where it was most needed. Her presence was calm but commanding, subtly guiding actions without overtly asserting authority. Lieutenant Sarah Green, watching from the edge of the dock, could see the difference immediately. While other officers flailed in an attempt to manage chaos, Emily's every gesture was precise and purposeful. She issued concise instructions, delegated tasks with confidence, and corrected mistakes with a calm, steady hand. It was a masterclass in leadership, though few realized it at the time. "Check the maintenance logs again," Emily instructed, approaching a group of junior officers. Her voice carried authority, yet there was no arrogance, just clarity. "Ensure all vessels are compliant with the checklist. Coordinate with the engineering team to verify readiness. Do not skip steps." The officers nodded and moved quickly, their initial panic dissipating as they fell into line with her guidance. Emily's influence spread quietly but unmistakably as the base began to stabilize under her subtle direction. Even recruits who had once mocked her watched in awe, realizing that this quiet, unassuming woman was orchestrating the operations of the entire station with unparalleled efficiency. Jason, however, was still struggling to process the shift. He had seen her skill in drills and obstacle courses, but this managing a real-time operational crisis with such precision was beyond anything he had imagined. His earlier attempts at dominance felt trivial now, almost childish, in comparison to her calm authority. "Follow her lead," whispered a fellow recruit to Jason. "She knows exactly what she's doing." Jason clenched his jaw, reluctant to admit it, but unable to argue. Emily's confidence was infectious. Her direction practical, her oversight meticulous. Under her guidance, the chaos began to subside. Orders were clarified, responsibilities assigned, and crews began functioning efficiently. Tasks that would normally have taken hours were completed in minutes. The base, once a flurry of anxious activity, now ran like a well-oiled machine. Emily didn't stop at efficiency. She noticed morale as well. A group of recruits had been struggling with a heavy load of equipment, their frustration mounting. Without hesitation, she stepped in, offering guidance on technique, distributing the load more effectively, and demonstrating proper form. Her calm demeanor and quiet instruction transformed panic into competence. The recruits, previously tense and anxious, found themselves working in sync under her direction. By midday, the Department of Defense inspection team arrived, their vehicles rolling through the gates. They were professional, stern, and clearly experienced in evaluating operational readiness. The base, however, now moved with purpose, cohesion, and confidence, a stark contrast to the initial chaos. Emily had not only stabilized the environment, but had elevated it, transforming panic into performance. Jason and his peers stood at attention, realizing fully now that Emily was no ordinary officer. The woman they had mocked, challenged, and underestimated was the orchestrator of their newfound efficiency. Every order she had given, every correction, every subtle demonstration of leadership had been deliberate, precise, and effective. As the inspection team moved through the base, Emily guided the flow with seamless coordination. She answered questions calmly, directed crews to demonstrate readiness, and ensured that each department presented its best performance. Observers, both within the base and among the inspectors, could sense a palpable shift in tone. Where anxiety had once ruled, confidence now prevailed. Jason, who had spent the morning attempting to match her, now felt a mixture of admiration and humility. Emily's leadership was not flashy or domineering. It was quiet, precise, and absolute. Every movement, every instruction, every observation reinforced her competence, leaving no doubt about her capability. By late afternoon, the inspection concluded. The Department of Defense team, impressed by the organization, discipline, and effectiveness of the base, offered their commendations. Officers exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that the transformation they had witnessed was extraordinary. The recruits, once skeptical and defiant, now moved with renewed confidence and respect, their earlier arrogance replaced by admiration. Emily, standing at the edge of the inspection area, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had not only stabilized the base under pressure, but had demonstrated leadership in its purest form through action, observation, and quiet authority. She had shown the recruits, the officers, and even the inspection team that competence and composure were far more powerful than aggression or bluster. Jason approached her cautiously, his earlier bravado replaced by tentative respect. I didn't think you could handle it," he admitted, voice low. You were incredible." Emily's eyes met his, calm and steady. "Leadership isn't about proving yourself to others," she said softly. "It's about ensuring everyone around you can perform their best. Today, you and your peers demonstrated both potential and areas for growth. That is what matters." Jason nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of her words. He realized that the challenge had been more than physical or operational. It had been a lesson in humility, respect, and understanding. Emily had taught him, and the others, that true leadership was measured not by ego or rank alone, but by the ability to inspire, guide, and elevate those around you. Lieutenant Green, observing from a distance, felt a mixture of awe and relief. She had suspected Emily's capability from the beginning, but the events of the day confirmed it beyond doubt. The recruits, officers, and entire base had witnessed a subtle but profound transformation, guided by a woman whose calm authority had reshaped both action and attitude. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the harbor, Emily moved among the crews one final time. She observed their interactions, noted improvements, and offered small corrections where necessary. Her presence, though quiet, left an indelible mark. The base, once on the verge of chaos, now hummed with efficiency, respect, and cohesion. Jason, reflecting on the day's events, recognized the truth he had been resisting. The new girl was not simply competent, she was extraordinary. She had handled every challenge, every observation, and every subtle test with calm authority, leaving no doubt about her skill, judgment, and leadership. And he, along with the other recruits, had been humbled by her quiet competence. Emily Hart, the woman who had arrived as an unassuming newcomer, had quietly orchestrated a transformation. The base had faced its first real test under her watch, and she had not only met it, she had exceeded it, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. Her authority, though still largely unrecognized by those she led, was undeniable in its effect. As night fell over Naval Station Norfolk, the base settled into a rhythm it had not known before. The recruits who had once mocked her now spoke of her in hushed tones, a mixture of awe and curiosity in their voices. Officers, too, were beginning to understand that Emily Hart was unlike anyone they had encountered, a leader whose influence was profound, subtle, and transformative. And Emily herself, standing quietly on the pier and watching the harbor glow in the last light of day, allowed herself a moment of reflection. The challenge had been met, the base had been steadied, and respect had begun to take root. But she knew this was only the beginning. The true test of loyalty, discipline, and character was yet to come. And when it arrived, she would be ready to guide, challenge, and transform those around her once again. The turning point had arrived. Emily Hart had proven her competence, established her authority, and begun shaping the base in ways no one had anticipated. The stage was set for the next chapter, where the whispers, curiosity, and respect she had earned would grow into understanding, loyalty, and lasting transformation. The following morning dawned crisp and clear over Naval Station Norfolk, the harbor glinting under the first light. The base moved with its usual energy sailors jogging along the docks, maintenance crews readying vessels, and recruits lined up for morning drills. Yet an unusual tension lingered in the air. Whispers of the previous day's events, the obstacle course, Emily Hart's flawless leadership during the inspection, had spread across the base. Curiosity mingled with uncertainty. Who was this quiet, unassuming woman who seemed to command respect without raising her voice? Jason Miller, still reeling from the lessons he had learned under her calm direction, walked nervously along the training grounds. He had begun to see Emily not as a peer or subordinate, but as someone far above the usual hierarchy. His frustration had transformed into curiosity and a grudging respect. Yet he remained unaware of the magnitude of her authority. Emily moved through the base as usual, her calm gaze sweeping over personnel. Today was not about drills or inspections. Today was about visibility, about setting the record straight. She had been observing for days, cataloging skills, weaknesses, and character traits. It was time to ensure that the recruits, officers, and even the senior staff understood the full scope of her authority, not through intimidation, but through undeniable clarity. The recruits assembled near the training yard, whispers and speculation thick in the air. Some discussed the possible reasons for Emily's capabilities, while others quietly confessed that they had underestimated her. Jason lingered at the edge, uncertain whether to approach or observe silently. Emily approached the gathered recruits with her usual calm assurance. She did not shout, nor did she demand attention. Her presence alone, steady and composed, drew the eyes of everyone present. The whispers quieted, replaced by attentive silence. "Good morning, everyone," Emily began, her voice calm and precise. "Over the past few days, I have observed your performance, your strengths, and your areas for improvement. I have seen moments of excellence, but also moments of hesitation and error. My role here is not to embarrass you, but to ensure that this base operates at its highest standard. That standard begins with understanding leadership, responsibility, and accountability." A murmur rippled through the group, but no one interrupted. There was a strange gravity to her words, a weight that commanded attention without coercion. Jason felt it deeply, a realization forming slowly in his mind that she was unlike anyone he had encountered in his career. "I am Emily Hart," she continued, pausing to let her words sink in. "And I am the Admiral of this base. Every decision, every operation, every standard you see here is under my command. The authority I hold is absolute, yet it is exercised with patience, observation, and precision. I arrived here as a new girl not to deceive, but to assess, understand, and guide this base without the distractions of preconceived notions or assumptions about my rank." A stunned silence followed. Recruits froze mid-step, exchanging wide-eyed glances. Jason's jaw dropped, and a mix of disbelief and awe swept through the assembled group. Officers nearby stiffened, some exchanging shocked looks, others bowing subtly in acknowledgement of her rank. "You?" Jason began, his voice trailing off. "You're the Admiral?" Emily nodded, her expression calm and steady. "Yes, the challenges you issued, the tests you attempted, and the drills you conducted were all observed. Your reactions, your character, and your willingness to learn have been noted. Leadership is not about bluster or aggression. It is about observing, guiding, and empowering those around you. Some of you have demonstrated potential. Others will need guidance to reach it." The realization hit Jason and the other recruits like a tidal wave. Every misjudgment, every underestimation they had made, now loomed large. The woman they had teased, challenged, and doubted was the very person whose authority surpassed everyone on the base. The weight of their assumptions, their arrogance, and their actions settled uncomfortably in their minds. Lieutenant Sarah Green, who had watched Emily carefully for days, allowed herself a small, impressed smile. She had sensed the magnitude of Emily's skill, but seeing it confirmed publicly had a different impact entirely. Emily's authority was undeniable, and the revelation forced everyone to recalibrate their perception of hierarchy, competence, and respect. Emily continued, her tone calm but commanding. Leadership is earned through observation, action, and respect, not simply granted by title. You may have laughed at me when I arrived, questioned my abilities, or doubted my competence. But every action you have taken has been noted, assessed, and used to improve both your performance and the overall efficiency of this base. The recruits shifted uneasily, realizing the subtle lessons she had been teaching all along. Every obstacle course, every challenge, every demonstration of skill had been designed to reveal their character and competence, not to embarrass them, but to guide them. The truth dawned slowly. They had been learning without realizing it. Jason stepped forward, a mixture of humility and awe in his expression. I didn't understand, he admitted. I thought you were just another recruit. I didn't see all of this. You've taught us more than anyone else here. Emily's gaze softened slightly, acknowledging his words. Acknowledgement of learning is the first step toward growth. Humility, reflection, and willingness to adapt are what distinguish a competent sailor from an exceptional one. Today, you have all witnessed that leadership comes not from intimidation, but from the ability to guide, observe, and inspire. You now know what is expected, and the standard will not waver. The air was heavy with realization. Recruits who had mocked her were subdued, some nodding silently, others whispering apologies. Officers who had doubted her subtly adjusted their posture, acknowledging that her calm authority had not only stabilized the base during the inspection, but elevated the entire operation. Even Jason, who had once sought to assert dominance over her, now stood in quiet admiration, a newfound respect grounding him. Emily allowed a pause, letting the weight of her revelation settle fully. From this moment forward, she said, you will understand that assumptions can mislead, arrogance can blind, and competence can be quietly transformative. My role is to guide this base, to ensure operational readiness, and to cultivate respect and discipline. Your role is to learn, adapt, and contribute to the excellence we strive to maintain. Her words carried a weight that no demonstration or drill could achieve. They were the embodiment of authority and experience, grounded in patience, observation, and strategic insight. The recruits and officers alike felt the impact immediately, their earlier skepticism replaced by awareness of her true position and the responsibility she now held. Jason exhaled slowly, his mind racing through the events of the past days, the obstacle courses, the inspections, the calm interventions, and the subtle lessons in leadership. He realized that every challenge, every moment of tension, had been a deliberate measure to assess character, skill, and adaptability. He had underestimated her, misjudged her abilities, and assumed her calm demeanor was ordinary. Now, he understood the full measure of Emily Hart. Lieutenant Green stepped forward, her expression one of professional respect. Admiral Hart, she said formally, your methods are impressive. The base has responded efficiently and professionally. Your presence has clearly reshaped operations, morale, and discipline. I underestimated the value of observation and subtle guidance. Emily nodded, her calm authority unshaken. Observation and patience are powerful tools, she replied. They reveal truth, assess character, and foster growth. Today, you and your peers have witnessed that leadership is not simply about command, it is about understanding, guiding, and cultivating potential. The lessons you have learned will serve both the base and your own careers well. For the recruits, the revelation was transformative. The new girl, they had challenged, underestimated, and observed without respect, was now undeniably the authority figure of the base. The realization sparked a mix of awe, humility, and determination. They understood, perhaps for the first time, the difference between casual competence and true leadership. As Emily concluded her address, the recruits and officers stood in silent acknowledgement. The murmurs of speculation and curiosity had ended. The base, now fully aware of her authority, moved forward under her guidance with a newfound cohesion and respect. Jason approached Emily one final time, his voice low and sincere. "Thank you for showing us. I didn't realize. I won't make the mistake of underestimating you again." Emily's expression softened, just slightly, acknowledging his sincerity. "Learning from mistakes is part of growth," she said. "Now, take what you've learned and apply it. The base's success depends on all of you." By the end of the day, the transformation was complete. The recruits, officers, and personnel alike had witnessed the full scope of Emily Hart's authority. Her calm leadership, meticulous observation, and subtle guidance had reshaped the base, instilled respect, and fostered a culture of excellence. The whispers, rumors, and speculation had been replaced with understanding and acknowledgement. Emily Hart, the quiet, unassuming woman who had arrived as a new girl, was now fully recognized as the Admiral of the base. Her revelation was more than a statement of rank. It was a demonstration of leadership, authority, and the quiet power of competence. The base, having learned humility, respect, and the value of observation, now stood ready for the challenges ahead. The revelation had arrived, and with it, a new chapter for Naval Station Norfolk, one guided by calm authority, careful observation, and unwavering competence. The morning at Naval Station Norfolk began with the crisp tongue of salt air drifting in from the harbor, carrying with it a sense of renewal. The base was alive with the familiar rhythm of drills, engines, and footsteps on concrete, yet an unmistakable change had taken root. The revelation of Emily Hart's authority had reshaped the dynamics of the station. Whispers of awe and respect were now replaced with attentive focus and cautious curiosity. Recruits and officers alike were eager to see how this quiet, unassuming admiral would guide them through the challenges of everyday life and the trials that were to come. Emily walked through the training yard, noting the subtle changes in posture, demeanor, and attention. Even Jason Miller, who had once regarded her with skepticism and a touch of arrogance, now followed her with quiet attentiveness. The recruits moved more deliberately, aware that their every action, though no longer secretly observed, was under the guidance of someone whose competence far exceeded their understanding. Today's first challenge was operational rather than physical. A scheduled simulation exercise would test the readiness of the base's emergency response units. The recruits and junior officers had been preparing, but the weight of Emily's authority added a new layer of seriousness. Emily herself did not impose a harsh hand. Instead, she positioned herself as an observer and subtle guide, allowing individuals to demonstrate initiative while gently steering the process where necessary. As the simulation began, it quickly became apparent that past inefficiencies would be exposed. Some teams struggled with communication, others hesitated under pressure, and a few made errors in execution. Emily moved quietly among them, noting patterns, evaluating reactions, and providing brief, precise corrections that redirected efforts without diminishing confidence. Her approach was instructive rather than punitive, and gradually the performance of the units improved. Jason, assigned to a communications team, experienced the impact of her guidance firsthand. Initially flustered and prone to rushing commands, he received subtle corrections from Emily. Her calm instructions allowed him to regain composure, coordinate effectively with his teammates, and execute complex maneuvers with surprising precision. Each adjustment reinforced the lesson she had imparted, during the obstacle course and the inspection. Leadership is not about dominance, but about clarity, guidance, and empowering others to succeed. By mid-morning, the simulation had progressed to its most critical phase. The teams were required to coordinate the evacuation of personnel from a simulated shipboard emergency while simultaneously managing communication with the base's command center. Under normal circumstances, this level of complexity would have caused confusion and delays. Today, however, the atmosphere was markedly different. Emily's prior guidance, combined with the recruits' growing respect and understanding, resulted in an operation that flowed with efficiency and precision. Even the most resistant personnel began to recognize the power of her approach. Recruits who had once scoffed at her calm demeanor now sought her counsel, appreciating the clarity and composure she brought to every challenge. Officers adjusted their methods, mirroring her example of measured observation and decisive intervention. Emily's leadership was infectious, quietly shaping the culture of the base without overt assertion of power. During a brief lull, Emily gathered the key team leaders. Her eyes, steady and discerning, swept over each individual. Today's exercise has revealed both strengths and areas that need refinement, she said. Your ability to remain composed, communicate clearly, and act decisively under pressure determines not only operational success, but the safety and efficiency of everyone under your command. Mistakes are lessons, not failures, but repeated errors without reflection are unacceptable. Her words resonated deeply. They were firm, yet encouraging. They emphasized responsibility and accountability without diminishing morale. Jason, reflecting on the events of the past week, understood that this was a continuation of the leadership lessons he had been learning since Emily's arrival. The challenges, the subtle guidance, and the eventual revelation of her rank had all been steps toward cultivating competence, humility, and discipline among the personnel. The simulation resumed, and the base responded with remarkable cohesion. Teams that had previously struggled now operated with confidence and efficiency. Errors were corrected in real time. Communication was clear and concise, and coordination between units was seamless. Emily observed silently, satisfied that her approach was fostering not only competence, but resilience and teamwork. As the simulation concluded, the recruits and officers gathered for debriefing. Emily stood at the front, her presence commanding attention without the need for dramatic assertion. She acknowledged successes, highlighted areas for improvement, and offered specific, actionable guidance for refining processes. Her feedback was precise, constructive, and delivered with calm authority, reinforcing the lessons of observation, initiative, and disciplined action. Jason approached her afterward, a mixture of admiration and humility evident on his face. "Admiral Hart," he began, "I've never seen anyone lead like that. Not just today, but everything, the drills, the inspections, the way you guide without dominating. It's incredible." Emily's expression softened, acknowledging his sincerity. "Leadership is not about demonstrating superiority," she said. "It's about ensuring that every individual can perform at their best. Your growth and the growth of those around you determines the success of the base. Competence without guidance is wasted potential. Guidance without competence is ineffective. True leadership balances both." The day continued with smaller operational tasks, each designed to reinforce coordination, discipline, and critical thinking. Emily monitored quietly, intervening only when necessary, allowing personnel to take initiative and learn from experience. Even minor successes and failures were leveraged as lessons, reinforcing the principles of observation, reflection, and adaptability. By late afternoon, Emily convened a meeting with the senior officers. The base had performed exceptionally well under pressure, and the cumulative improvements were evident. She highlighted the accomplishments of teams, addressed remaining inefficiencies, and outlined a plan for ongoing development. Her strategic insight, combined with her ability to cultivate trust and respect, left a lasting impression on the assembled officers. Today has proven that with clear guidance, observation, and patience, personnel can achieve remarkable results, Emily stated. However, this is not the end of our work. Leadership requires constant refinement, vigilance, and adaptability. We must continue to foster a culture of respect, responsibility, and excellence, ensuring that every member of this base understands their role and performs it to the best of their ability. Jason, standing at the back of the room, reflected on how far he had come in just a few days. His initial arrogance had been replaced by humility, his skepticism by admiration, and his casual effort by intentional focus. Emily's influence had transformed not only his understanding of leadership, but also his approach to teamwork and personal responsibility. Recruits and officers alike left the meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. The base, once a collection of individuals working in isolation, now functioned as a cohesive unit, guided by the subtle yet powerful leadership of Admiral Hart. Her approach had cultivated trust, instilled discipline, and inspired loyalty without force, argument, or intimidation. As the sun set over the harbor, casting a warm glow over the ships and docks, Emily took a moment to walk along the pier. She reflected on the trials of the day, the operational challenges, the subtle tests, and the moments of triumph. Her approach had been validated, her methods effective, and her authority now firmly recognized. Yet she knew that leadership was an ongoing process, and that the next challenges, whether operational, interpersonal, or strategic, would demand the same balance of observation, guidance, and patience. Jason approached her once more, hesitating before speaking. Admiral Hart, thank you for everything. I understand now. You've taught us lessons we'll never forget. I hope we can continue to live up to your expectations. Emily nodded, her expression calm but firm. That is the goal, Jason. Leadership is not about perfection. It is about growth, reflection, and the willingness to learn. Continue to observe, adapt, and strive for excellence. The strength of this base depends on each of you. As night fell over Naval Station Norfolk, the base settled into a quieter rhythm, the lessons of the day resonating with recruits, officers, and personnel alike. Emily Hart, the quiet admiral who had arrived as a new girl, had transformed the culture, instilled respect, and demonstrated the power of calm. Deliberate leadership. The trials of the day had been met with success, the triumphs clear, and the foundation for lasting change firmly established. Emily's influence had reached every corner of the base, shaping attitudes, inspiring confidence, and cultivating competence. The recruits, once skeptical and defiant, now understood the principles of leadership through observation, guidance, and example. Emily paused one final time, gazing out at the harbor under the fading light. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new lessons. The trials of today were only the beginning, and the true measure of leadership would be seen in the days and weeks to come. Yet she was confident. She had proven her approach, earned respect, and inspired loyalty. And with patience, observation, and deliberate guidance, the base would continue to thrive under her command. The trials had tested them. The triumphs had proven their growth, and the future, guided by Admiral Hart's quiet authority, promised continued excellence. The dawn broke over Naval Station Norfolk with a crisp clarity, the golden light reflecting off the steel hulls of ships in the harbor. The base was alive with energy and purpose, but the atmosphere was different now, charged with confidence, respect, and a shared understanding of excellence. In the days since Admiral Emily Hart had revealed her true identity, every corner of the station had shifted subtly yet profoundly. Her presence was no longer a quiet influence or whispered rumor. It was a guiding force that shaped attitudes, actions, and aspirations. Recruits moved with precision, their previous uncertainty replaced by determination. Officers coordinated efficiently, mindful of protocols, and ready to lead their teams under Emily's guidance. Even the most skeptical personnel had come to understand the quiet power of her leadership, the combination of observation, patience, and decisive action that left no room for doubt about her competence or intentions. Emily herself began her day with a walk along the docks, observing the rhythms of the base. She noted the improved coordination among teams, the attentiveness of recruits, and the subtle confidence that radiated from officers who had once doubted her. Leadership, she reflected, was not about commanding respect. It was about earning it through consistent guidance, clear expectations, and empowering others to achieve their best. Jason Miller, now fully aware of the Admiral's capabilities and philosophy, approached her quietly. "Admiral Hart," he said, voice tinged with humility and respect. "I've learned more from you in the past week than I ever expected. I want to continue to grow, to be someone worthy of the standards you expect." Emily nodded, her calm gaze meeting his. "Growth is a choice, Jason. You've already begun by reflecting on your actions, accepting lessons, and striving to improve. Leadership is not just about rank or authority. It is about recognizing potential in yourself and others, and cultivating it deliberately. Continue to observe, learn, and act with integrity. That is how excellence is maintained." The day's schedule included routine operations, training drills, and team exercises. Yet under Emily's guidance, even ordinary tasks became opportunities for growth, discipline, and cohesion. She moved silently among the recruits, offering subtle corrections, brief encouragement, and occasional demonstrations that clarified technique without drawing attention to her authority. Her influence was felt rather than announced, a hallmark of her leadership style. By mid-morning, a new challenge emerged, a logistical exercise requiring the coordination of supplies, personnel, and transport for a simulated emergency deployment. This test, designed to evaluate both operational readiness and leadership initiative, revealed both strengths and areas needing improvement. Emily observed with her usual calm precision, allowing teams to navigate the exercise while interjecting only when necessary to redirect effort, clarify instructions, or demonstrate optimal strategies. Jason's unit faced difficulties with communication, their initial attempts at coordination faltering under pressure. Yet Emily's quiet intervention allowed them to recalibrate. She guided them with brief instructions, prompting reflection and initiative rather than dictating every action. The difference was immediate. Confusion gave way to clarity, hesitation to decisive execution. Jason felt a sense of pride as he and his team began operating effectively, their confidence bolstered by Emily's subtle mentorship. Lieutenant Green, observing the exercise from a distance, remarked to a colleague, "She transforms potential into performance." Her leadership isn't about control, it's about enabling others to achieve their best. "I've never seen anything like it." As the exercise concluded successfully, Emily convened a debriefing. Her approach was measured yet inspiring, acknowledging accomplishments, addressing areas for refinement, and reinforcing the principles of accountability, observation, and discipline. Every word, every gesture, conveyed authority without intimidation, guidance without condescension. "The strength of this base," Emily addressed the assembled recruits and officers, "lies not in the rank of any single individual, but in the collective capability of every member to act with competence, integrity, and awareness. Leadership is not a title, it is a responsibility. Excellence is not optional, it is a standard. Every action you take, every decision you make, contributes to the legacy of this base. Uphold that standard, and you honor not only your role, but the mission and the men and women you serve alongside." Her words resonated deeply. They were a culmination of the lessons embedded in every obstacle course, inspection, and operational challenge she had orchestrated. Recruits who had once been defiant now listened intently, absorbing every nuance of her guidance. Officers reflected on their own practices, recalibrating priorities and methods in response to her insights. Even those previously resistant to change recognized the transformative impact of her leadership. As the day progressed, Emily initiated a series of mentoring sessions with key personnel, fostering communication, strategic thinking, and problem-solving skills. She emphasized the importance of empathy in leadership, noting that understanding the capabilities and challenges of each team member was essential for success. Jason, seated among his peers, absorbed every lesson, increasingly aware that leadership was as much about insight and patience as it was about action and command. During a break near the harbor, Emily paused to observe the ships docked in the glowing afternoon sun. Each vessel represented not just operational readiness, but the collective effort, discipline, and dedication of the personnel she now guided. Leadership, she thought, was a ripple effect. The actions of one individual influenced the performance and morale of many. Her role was to cultivate that ripple, ensuring that competence and respect extended from officer to recruit, from deckhand to admiral. In the evening, a ceremonial gathering was held to recognize exceptional performance among the recruits and officers. Emily presided, offering commendations with clarity, sincerity, and precision. Those recognized understood that the honor reflected not only their individual effort, but also the guidance, observation, and mentorship they had received under her leadership. The ceremony was a celebration of achievement, discipline, and unity, reinforcing the standards she had cultivated since her arrival. Jason, awarded for his improvement and initiative, approached Emily afterward. I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You've changed the way I think about leadership, responsibility, and teamwork. I hope I can live up to your expectations." Emily placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Excellence is earned every day, Jason. Recognition is temporary. Growth is permanent. Continue to learn, observe, and act with integrity. That is how you build a legacy worth leaving." As night settled over the base, Emily walked quietly along the pier, reflecting on the transformation she had fostered. The recruits were more disciplined, the officers more cohesive, and the entire base operated with a clarity and focus that had been absent before her arrival. Yet she knew that leadership was an ongoing endeavor, requiring vigilance, adaptability, and unwavering commitment. The foundation had been laid, the lessons taught, and the culture transformed, but maintaining and deepening that change would require continued guidance and subtle intervention. In the quiet of the evening, Jason approached once more, this time with a sense of resolve. "Admiral Hart," he said, "I understand now. Leadership isn't about being the strongest or the loudest. It's about seeing the bigger picture, guiding others, and helping them reach their potential. Thank you for showing us what that looks like." Emily's calm smile acknowledged both his words and his understanding. "Leadership is a journey, Jason. Today, you've taken an important step. Tomorrow, there will be new challenges. Approach them with clarity, patience, and respect. That is how you ensure the success of your team, the base, and your own growth." The following days reinforced the lessons she had imparted. Emily continued to balance observation with strategic guidance, allowing the recruits and officers to exercise judgment while ensuring standards were met. Her methods emphasized reflection, initiative, and collaboration, fostering an environment where competence and respect thrived simultaneously. Months passed, and the transformation of the base became undeniable. Recruits advanced with confidence, officers coordinated seamlessly, and operational efficiency reached unprecedented levels. Emily's quiet guidance, once mysterious and unassuming, had matured into a culture of excellence that extended across the entire station.